Well, folks, hello and welcome to the Naren Agarwal show. Today is going to be an interesting show. The reason being, I have an old friend of mine from college, but that's not the reason why it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting because the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. Let me introduce you guys. Mr. Vernon Billups Jr. has a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in sociology. He's worked for 3 years in the Indianapolis area as a life skills specialist for youth. And currently, he's at the verge of ending his master's program at the North Central University in marriage and family therapy. I am so excited to have an in-depth conversation with Vernon. Vernon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Naren. It's a pleasure to be here. You sounded all professional. Things have changed since. Well, I guess things haven't changed. You've always been a professional speaker, so I'm just glad that you invited. I'm glad you invited me to have a conversation.
I'm so happy to have you, and I always remember you as somebody who was a great converser and who really had this knack for listening to people in depth. So I'm happy to have you here myself.
Thank you. Means a lot, truly.
What I'm really excited to explore today is the topic of family and marriage therapy. I think this is a topic that is not much heard of, especially where I am from in India. And I think it's a growing area, even in the US, around the world, family and marriage therapy. So I'm excited to explore that a little more. But what is family and marriage therapy? What is it?
Well, simply put, it is exactly what it says, marriage and family therapy. It's basically an opportunity for individuals to come together and kind of understand how they are interconnected, if you will. I always use the example that a family or a couple is like a unit, and you can never fully understand somebody in isolation. You know what I mean? And that's why there's so many approaches that you can use, and they're all going to be different based on the client. But for me, I like to use a family systems approach, and that's what we focus on, that emotional connectedness within a marriage or, a partnership or family, and understanding how we influence one another and how we're going to respond based on the other person, and how we kind of create this dysfunctional unit. And even, that dysfunctional unit can keep you at an equilibrium. You know what I mean? So even if it's bad, it's normal. So understanding how you can, break free of those patterns is big for a lot of people.
That sounds deep already. So how do you define family, and what is family defined as from a subjective point of view? From an academic point of view, I mean.
For me, I think family, personally, I feel like you can, you're born into this world with what we call family, right? But I also adopt the idea that you can choose your family. You have a lot of friends who are very, very important to you. That's considered family. I think it's very subjective to the person that you're asking. So I never want to put something into an isolated box. Like, this is what this is what that is. I feel like in America, that's what we do. We have to categorize everything, and it has to fit in this particular box. And if it doesn't, then it's an outcast. You know what I mean? But I think family is it just takes two people. Same for a partnership. It just takes two people. You and I could be considered family. And right there we could have a family conversation. I think when you get into therapy, though, more so, it's kind of the people that you deal with on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? So if there's a friend that I see once every 5 years, I'm probably not going to have, some sort of family therapy with that person. But let's say, I always use college for an example, when we lived in that apartment, that could be considered a family unit. You know what I mean? And it's a little different than what I would normally see, but nonetheless, it's very subjective, to answer your question.
That's pretty cool. So it's not just, you're saying it's beyond biology in some ways, when you really think about it. It's about the interconnectedness of people interacting frequently with one another in some way,
Yes.
and it could be subjectively called family.
Yes.
So why would a family need therapy? I mean, there are some answers to that, but I'm asking some basic questions so that I get your perspective. Why would anybody need therapy? Why would a family need therapy? It sounds like a foreign concept, right? It sounds like a very new idea. So tell us a little
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good question because I think sometimes you have people that come into therapy and they go, "What's the point? Why am I here?" You know? And I think, for me, why would they need therapy? I think people get to a point where they feel that they've done everything that they can to fix whatever issues or problems that they have going on. Um, and now they don't know what to do. What can I do? We've tried this, we've done that, and they're kind of just at wit's end. And I think for a lot of people, therapy is the last resort. Hey, I need somebody else to tell me what to do. And disclaimer, I always say that's not a therapist's job to fix somebody. Hey, you have a problem. I'm going to make it better for you. I think it's a joining process, and I'm here to help facilitate that. Um,
Hmm.
but to make this long story less long, I think people come to therapy because they're stuck in a pattern. And I used the word equilibrium earlier, and we all have that equilibrium within a family unit or a relationship, where things are normalized. This is normal, and sometimes that normal can be dysfunctional, or threatening to people within that unit. um, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So
Um,
what would be an example? What would be an example for that?
um, let's see. So we could say that um, mom, the mother of this child, they have a 10-year-old son. Let's say they're married. Mom, reaches out and says, "Hey, I'm struggling. My son is failing. He used to do so well in school. And every time that he does something wrong, my husband, kind of brushes it off. Oh, it's okay. He's just being a kid. So I don't really know what to do anymore because I'm trying to, implement these things, these morals, these values into my son, and my husband just doesn't seem like he's interested." And that right there, and that's just a small example, but that creates that um, tension within that household, because now maybe um, the relationship between the mother and the father, it's being exposed more. So they're presenting, hey, my son has the issue, but now it's coming out that, well, the mother and the father, their relationship hasn't been the greatest the past 5 years. You know what I mean? So I think that's an opportunity where you come in for one thing, and once you start to communicate and things are released, it's, oh, there are more things. It's more complex than you think. More things are
That's
coming out about
deep.
about
That's
that family.
deep.
You know,
Ah.
um,
So it's like the symptoms are actually not the problems in families. So oftentimes that son thing is a symptom in some way, but there's a deeper cause to that, and there might be layers and layers and patterns of it. And when you come to therapy, sometimes the therapist can unbox those patterns, and that's why you say you can't do it. You facilitate maybe the unboxing so that they can really see the reality. Am I getting that right?
yeah, that's exactly what it is. And there's so many models and approaches to use for in therapy. It's very overwhelming, especially for an up and coming therapist, because you want to be competent in all of these approaches, which can be hard to do because you can't just pick one size fits all and apply it to every client that you meet with. You can have one that you adopt as your own because this is the one that you feel most comfortable with. So I always use family systems, where I'm looking at that multi-generational impact. So how is what's going on in your life? How has that been influenced by, your mother and your father, or your brother and your sister, or even as far as back as to your grandparents or your great grandparents? But kind of what you had just mentioned, you kind of said something, so in narrative therapy, they like to externalize the problem. So it's not necessarily when somebody comes in, they may have a presenting issue, but it's not them, if that makes sense. We're trying to separate the two. This person's not the problem. The problem is the problem.
There's multiple ways of looking at a client who comes with a problem, and you're saying you use the family systems approach, which is generational view. What are some other ways of looking at family issues? Like, what are some other perspectives and lenses someone can look at family issues from?
Well, like I said, there's a lot. I kind of touched on family systems as being a way to look at a family unit.
Okay.
We have behavioral therapy. You can also use an approach called solution focused therapy, which is very strength based. In solution focused therapy, it's, hey, I'm not really concerned with what the problem is or how you got to be in the situation that you're in, but what's the solution? How can we alleviate whatever that is? And that's a complete other end of the spectrum, but it's still a very effective way to communicate, because like I said, it works. Different things work for different people. So some people, they don't care about, hey, my father or my mother did this or said that and that influenced me. They just come in and they say, hey, this is what's going on, I need to get it fixed. And that's I don't know what word to use for it, but it's more brief, if you will, and as treatment goes. It's brief. We're getting to the point and we're moving on. We're not spending a lot of time on the minor details.
Great. I mean, that's really eye opening, and I can see the difference at the lens perspective of how we're looking at when family issues come up, and you take different approaches. What does a normal therapy session look like, and our families, is it kind of a taboo? Like, oh, they're going for family therapy, something's wrong with them, or is that changing? What do you think? Should it be a taboo?
So I guess that question would be two parts. So I'll first touch on what does a session look like. A typical session is going to look different depending on the therapist. When you think of therapy, you think of, this very monotone individual. You come into their office, it's dead silent, and they say, well, how do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? That's the concept that a lot of people run with. And I think it's some therapists may run their sessions like that. I think it's very again, subjective to the person you're dealing with. But for me, and for the private practice that I'm interning for, the first 2 or 3 sessions are basically just an opportunity for introductions, and we'll sit and we'll try and just ask basic questions. What do you do? What did your mother and father do? What are their names? How was your childhood? Things like that. And I'm just, freestyling that right now. It's a little more detailed than that and a little more formal. But, when you're using a family systems approach, we use a genogram, and it's basically a family tree. So when I'm sitting with a client and I'm asking these questions, or I'm sitting with a couple asking these questions, I'm asking, mother, father, brother, sister, how old are they? Are they still around? Do you have communication with them? What does that look like? What did it look like in the past? And then once you get a good idea of that person and their family unit as a whole, you can kind of sit back and figure out, hey, this is sticking out to me. These are some issues that I think that are affecting this marriage or affecting this family, or even affecting this person. So then that 3rd or 4th session, you come in for a feedback session, and that's where we look at that genogram, and we're pretty much pointing out what we see from that, and it's very awesome, to see how somebody that didn't think of it from that perspective, and they're looking at it and they're going, oh wow, like I didn't think of that, but that's had an impact on me this whole time and I didn't realize it. So that's kind of what in a nutshell a session would look like. And I know you piggybacked with is it taboo, as far as people saying, oh, they're going to therapy. And again, I think that it's still there. I think that's still relevant to this day. There's a lot of people who refuse therapy because they say, hey, I can figure it out on my own. I'm independent. I don't need somebody. I don't want to tell you my problems. You know what I mean? I don't want to put my business out there. But I think, slowly but surely it's evolving just like everything else. You have no choice. I feel like when you're on this planet, you don't have a choice. Things are going to evolve. Things are going to change, and you either have to keep up or you get left behind. And I just love when a lot of people, join that train. They understand that therapy is important. It's not you whining or complaining. It's you, getting guidance, and I don't always tell people you don't have to hire an actual therapist, but you need somebody who is going to be objective and give you the facts. I'm not going to, a lot of times you meet and talk to friends and, they side with you. Oh, it's okay. This person is just this, they're rude, they're disrespectful. It's not on you. And those people, I say, can, they're your friends, but they have your best interest at all points. So it's not going to be from that holistic lens. Like, hey, I understand this, but what about when you did or said this? What about this that you have going on? So
Wow. No, that's wonderful, and I really love what you said. It's about getting that objective perspective, that bird's eye view on the issue, and then people having that aha moment. Whoa, like I was so close into the problem, I didn't even look at this turn, and that's awesome. Vernon, what are some common patterns that you see in people that causes family issues? What are some common patterns that are causing family issues in the modern world, in today's world, that you've experienced?
so it could be anything from, you have a husband who's an alcoholic, and the wife is basically enabling that because they fear, what could come from them making that an issue. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So they like to, in therapy, they call that being codependent. So they put up with a lot of problematic behaviors because they fear separation, and they have an impaired level of autonomy. So they, in a sense, enable that person to continue doing what they do, to continue on that example. If there's a couple and the husband is an alcoholic, maybe the wife is his designated driver. So even though she doesn't condone these behaviors, she's enabling it because she fears what could come if she makes that an issue. Hey, John, you have an issue, you need help. You know, um, it could go anywhere from that. You could have people that come in for family therapy, maybe because one of the there could be what they call a triangulation. So in family systems theory, they call it a triangulation when maybe you have a parent who has a certain relationship with the child, and now that relationship is affecting the marriage, if you will. You could see it where the mother and the daughter, have a relationship, and that's causing issues with the mother and the father. And that's something that happens frequently, so then you have a lot of these small relationships that are impacting the larger unit.
That's really interesting. I love the point of the triangulation, because I think in Indian society we see it a lot, and there's like a lot of cultural jokes about a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, because they're fixing that triangulation, and the son is the connect between them, and how there's always tension between those relationships. So I can relate in even with jokes that we hear, to the
Yeah.
theory of triangulation.
Yeah. That triangulation is something I feel that is everywhere, and sometimes it's not impactful because it's not so emphasized or it's not so negative. But I feel like there's always some sort of triangulation, and innately we as human beings will tend to do that. If you and I get into an argument, I'm immediately going to try and pull the person that's closest and say, hey, didn't Naren say this? Or remember when he did, aren't I right? We always need that person to kind of back us up,
That's such a good point. Yeah, like we need validation. We're seeking for that validation, so that like I had an argument with somebody, but yeah, I want to be validated that I'm right. So I want to hear that right from whoever's next closest to me. Huh.
all the time.
Wow. So what are some myths around family therapy? What are some myths?
I think, and I won't act as an expert, kind of like what we said, off air. But something that comes up a lot is therapy guarantees that things will get better. We haven't figured everything out, but the therapist will figure it out, and if they can't figure it out, then that's their problem. It's not now we know it's not us. And to that, I always say, we're not there to solve your problem. I always tell people, I'm there as a facilitator. I'm there because I believe that you have the answers within you. It's my job to help you realize them and bring them out. But, going off of that as well, everybody has to be ready. And sometimes people are not ready. Every now and again, you'll get, a couple who comes in and they're both willing and ready to make necessary changes. And then more common than not, you have people who are not ready. Maybe, the male is ready, but, his partner isn't, and vice versa. And that's where it's different for everybody. So therapy doesn't guarantee that things are just going to magically disappear. It's a step in the right direction.
I love that point. Especially when you say that, some people, if they think that, okay, now the onus is on the therapist, then they're not taking responsibility. And I guess if you stop taking responsibility for your own relationship, it'll never work. So it's really important that you clarified that. And I think that's powerful, because ultimately it's when we take responsibility for our relationship, that's when we can make it work, right?
Yeah. And I think that's important. We all have a sense of accountability, or you need a sense of accountability. It can't be the other person. And that's something else that is misconceptualized, is that the therapist will fix the other person. So if you have a couple that comes in, it's finally somebody will tell my partner that they're crazy, or that this is negatively impacting, our relationship. And that happens a lot too. You have somebody that comes in and they want to place the blame, and they want to sit and they want to rant and destroy their partner, and it's, hey, you can do that for free at home, but when, you're paying somebody to sit and sit down with you, there has to be a little bit of interjection. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah.
That reminds me of certain situations, in maybe schools in India, or teachers, where the the dad and the mom go to the school like on open day or something, and they tell the teacher, "Hey, teacher, we've tried a lot. You gotta fix this guy. You gotta fix this girl. They're not listening to us." And they kind of put the onus on the teacher that it's you who gotta fix them. And this is the same thing that you're mentioning, right? Finally, somebody tells them that it's them, not us.
That's exactly what it is. And I know that all too well. When I was a life skills specialist, because I'm working in a school system. So I'm working with different kids in different grades, and the teachers, they're not competent in the field of therapy, nor should they be. That's not why they went to school, So sometimes they don't understand, or they didn't understand what my role was, or what my job title was, and I would get a lot of teachers who would say, hey, I need you to sit and talk with Jennifer because, this, that, and the third is going on. And they think that, by them talking to me, now they're going to get straight A's, they're never going to cause a disruption in the class. And mind you, these kids are in elementary school. So part of the behaviors are age appropriate. You know what I mean? But, people don't understand. And it goes back to what you said. Finally, I can release this burden from myself and put it on you. Let's see what you can do. you know?
That's so funny, bro. That's pretty funny and insightful at the same time. When you're having a family therapy, like family counselor therapy, is it one person? Is it always everybody, all the people involved? What kind of attendance do you need for to make the therapy work?
Um, again, it's really subjective. But let's say that you have a daughter who reaches out for therapy for her sister, herself, and her mother. That's a situation where, assuming that everybody's on board, everybody would need to be in attendance, at least, for the first session. So it gives everybody an opportunity to speak to why they think they're there. What would they like to see moving forward since they are present. And then as you go along, I think it can be healthy to have individual sessions with each person, so that they get that attention, that one-on-one. You have to be careful though, because you don't want it to turn into, you know, a triangulation where, one person may feel like you have a better relationship with them than somebody else in the family, if that makes sense. But sometimes, the most you can do as a therapist is encourage people to come in. But it's, when we talk about couples therapy, if something's going on within the relationship, it's very, very difficult. Not saying it can't be done, but it's very, very difficult to fix all of those problems with just one person present. So if you have a husband that comes in and says he's having issues within his marriage, it can be very, very difficult if his wife or his husband is not willing to attend. So again, like I said, it's very subjective. But in most of the situations, you'd like to have the family unit there because that's when the issues are occurring, when they're around one another. So it's important as a therapist to be able to see that firsthand, but also give everybody an opportunity to speak their mind, on what's going on.
Nice. What are some really powerful questions to ask to really, dig deep into the issues? What are some powerful questions to ask to see, like, what are the real core issues? What are some ways to really understand people and the real deep desire within them as to what's wrong and what's happening?
That's a good question. And I think if you're a veteran therapist, I think answering that question would be easier because you've had a lot of time to figure out what works, what doesn't. But I think just on a broader scale, when you're meeting with somebody, question, that I was mentioning would be just, hey, tell me about your dad. And that question alone could bring so much that, you don't think about. So, if I say, hey, tell me about your dad, and you go, well, he's 55, well, what did your dad do? Or, growing up, or what does he do now? Well, he used to drive a truck. And then at that point, you see it in people's minds. They're really having to sit back and think about, well, who is my dad? What did he do? What did he do for me? You know what I mean? And that's something that, so you're looking at me like, yeah, right. Like you asking somebody about their dad is going to, spark this huge conversation, but that's the part of being a therapist. You're literally just asking questions that you would ask in a conversation. And, if somebody says something, hey, yeah, my dad, I remember when I was 13, he was very verbally abusive. Well, tell me about that. Can you tell me about, what were the things that he said? How did that make you feel? Things like that. And you just have to follow up a question with a question, if that makes sense. And then as a therapist, you're in a sense allowing them to lead because you just want more insight on things that they're pointing out. Or sometimes the best thing, as you've mentioned off air, is to say nothing at all. You let that person free flow. They just say whatever they want to say. You give them that floor and you're writing things down. You could even split the paper where on one side, you have what they're saying to you. And then on the other side, you're writing down questions or thoughts or concerns that you feel like you may need to, revert back to at some point, to touch back on. But I don't want to leave you with that, because I know people are wondering, like, what's a good question to ask somebody? And there's always this question, if anybody in the therapy field, if there's anybody in the therapy field, they've heard this question, and it's that miracle question. It's, if you woke up tomorrow and all of your problems were gone, what would that look like? Or you could phrase it any way you want. If I did my job and I did everything that you expected me to do, 6 months from now, and you look back and you go, man, Vernon did everything that I asked of him. Life is great. What does that look like for you? And that really forces people to think about, well, yeah, I wouldn't want this. I would like this. I would love to be doing this. I'd love for my wife, to show some affection, just different things. And from there, you can kind of, sense what people want. What do they want out of therapy?
Wow, that's an amazing question. I'm a big fan of great questions too, more than great quotes, because I think questions are really a tool to dig deeper and understand better. And I think I'm going to take away from that. That question is amazing. The question is amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Vernon, when you're doing therapy, it can be really heavy on you. And I guess, the time that you've studied through it and the time you're working with kids, you get a lot of information from a lot of people. And some of that information can be emotionally tolling even to you, because you must be thinking, oh my God, that person's going through this. What do you do to take care of yourself and your mental health?
Yeah. I think at some point I got past the feeling of feeling so down, when I'm working with a kid, an underprivileged kid, or I see this family who's going through so much, because I've come to the realization that, I can't help everybody. I can't fix everything. And all I can do is provide what I can provide in that moment. And I have to go home and I have to be able to hang that coat up, per se, until I go back into work. So, let's say I'm meeting with people all day, I have to be able to mentally check out from that day's work, so that when I go home, I'm not bleeding that into my household. I have to be able to separate the two. I have a family. I have 3 kids. I have a fiance. But for me, it's really about finding that time for yourself, to vent as well, to get things off of your mind, or to do things that I like to do. I always tell people I love that I have a 30-minute commute to and from work, because if I've had a draining day, I have 30 minutes, to listen to a podcast, listen to an audio book, or just sit in silence, collect my thoughts, so that when I get to where I'm going, I can mentally check out. And that's something that's hard to do. I still have not managed that. I still have those days where things are really stressed, but one way I like to look at it is, sometimes when you're dealing with these families, the home that I'm going to is not as bad as what they have to go home to. And it kind of humbles you, when you're sitting and you're dealing, with these people and listening to their life story. It's, hey, I'm going home. I get to see my 3 kids. I get to lay down next to my fiance. I'm going home to what I like to call a happy place, and some people don't have that opportunity. They don't get to go home to, pick whatever you want out from the fridge, or, go ride your bike. They don't have that. And just taking the time to understand that not everybody is living the same life you're living, it can humble you, and it makes it, at least for me, that's kind of how I view it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It sounds like it's really almost like a skill that you got to develop as you keep going, to hang that coat up, as you said. Um, but a lot of respect for you, man. A lot of respect, because it's not easy. It's not easy what
No,
you're
no.
doing.
And It's not, but I always emphasize that anything that I say, it's my life's not perfect. You have a lot of people who say, how do you do it? You go to school, you have 3 kids, you work full time. And I never think about it. I don't think that I'm this godlike figure and I can do no wrong, because I am a human and I have mistakes and my life is not perfect. But like you said, you have to build whatever it is that that you're looking for, that's beneficial for you. I have to build up to being able to balance work, school, parenting.
Wow.
It's just a task, that, if it's important to you. I always tell people, if it's important to you, you will make time to put the work and the effort into it with anything you do. You know what I mean? If you truly care about it, if you truly care about somebody, you're going to put in that time and that effort, So, and I know that's
Yes,
what you're
sir.
doing, with the podcast and things like that. You talk about how, this is something you love to do. And because you love to do it, you're going to do whatever it takes. And it's not about, money. It's not about fame. It's not about attention. I'm trying to get this message to this large audience. And however I can do that, that's what I'm going to do. Serve it to the people,
I love that. Thank you, Vernon. What made you get into family therapy and marriage therapy? What was that motivational factor for you? Because I think it's a field that requires something that comes from within to get into. It's not a field where you just say, "Oh, I can make a lot of money, so let's do this." It's not like being a doctor. So, what was that motivational factor for you?
Yeah. And just to touch on that, yeah, money is definitely, if you want to make a lot of money, don't get into therapy. Become a doctor. Become a doctor. But for me, a lot of people ask me that, hey, like, I can imagine doing that. And for me, as you've complimented me for, in the past, and I greatly appreciate it. It's that passion, to understand somebody and to meet them where they're at. And I feel like, I'm just going to toot my own horn. For me, it feels like people view me as a safe person or a safe place. They pick up on that energy that, hey, I think I can trust this person. He's going to give it to me straight. He has my best interest, even if I don't. And the more I had people just reaching out to me, and talking to me, whether it was a friend, a sister, a colleague, anything like that, I was very comfortable in just communicating with them. And I've always had, positive feedback. Hey, you really, put things into perspective. I have people that I haven't talked to in 5 years and, we'll randomly link together and they'll say, do you remember when you did or said this? And I'm thinking, I completely forgot about that, but it was impactful for them, and I left a mark on them without even knowing it. And I think I finally got to a point where I said, I think I like talking to people, because language and communication runs everything. Verbal, nonverbal, body language, things you don't do. Communication is sometimes when you don't do anything. You
Ah,
know what I mean? You know what I mean?
wow.
And it's important. So I really loved, that you allowed me to come on the show today, and understanding that, you're trying to emphasize that communication, because it's within everything. Communication is so important. And to stop talking, I know I'm ranting, but that's kind of why I decided to get into to marriage and family therapy. And also, I think, a lot of therapists, at least the good ones, they're good because they've been broken at some point too. They've experienced a lot. And I think, at least for me, I enjoy people, and I think that they're very credible. How do you say that? Credible
Incredible,
when
yeah.
when they have experience. It's not always about the books. Education comes from experience in the world.
Word,
And that goes a long way. So
word.
I feel like I've went through a lot. My life hasn't been perfect, but it also wasn't the worst. Just as anybody else. But I think that builds for a greater therapist. Somebody that understands not just this one small tiny box, but from a larger scale.
Wow. I gotta say, man, you're deep. Your words are deep. And I love that the whole last portion that you just mentioned there. So thank you so much for that. Vernon, on that note, thanks so much for being on the show. Do you have any final comments or questions for me?
I don't think I do, Naren. I just really want to thank you. You know, it does mean a lot. You know, I was really excited to get up this morning and just not only catch up, but just have a conversation. You know, I love having deep, complex conversations. Even if I don't know a lot about something, I like to learn things. You know, so even when you ask me questions, it forces me to kind of think about, well, yeah, how do I feel about that? You know, so thank you. I hope that we can do it again in the future. I
Yes,
do.
sir. There's definitely going to be a part two where we go deeper and explore a little bit more about family and marriage therapy. Vernon, what a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you once again, my friend.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All love.
All love.